The tail end of 2021 really was a high point in an otherwise pretty bleak and disappointing year of entertainment. Damn man, between No Way Home and Arcane, I was just handing out drinker recommends quicker than G4 TV dishes out insults to its own audience. But one show that I never really got a chance to talk about was Midnight Mass, a Netflix miniseries written and directed by Mike Flanagan, best known as the creator of The Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor. Flanagan's shows are interesting because they function as a kind of anthology series, casting the same actors in different roles between shows, and using classic horror elements as more of a backdrop to explore bigger ideas and character dynamics. And I guess really, Midnight Mass is the culmination of this idea. It's a show that had me absolutely gripped by the second episode, and didn't let go until the poignant, moving finale. So what the hell, I might be late to the party on this one, but grab your communion wine because the drinker will now hear your confessions. The show opens with a quick intro for our main man, Riley Flynn, a hotshot investment banker who gets into a drunken car crash after partying a little too hard one night. Riley walks away with a few cuts and bruises, but unfortunately the young woman he ploughed into isn't so lucky. Flash forward 4 years and Riley's just been released from prison. With no money and nowhere else to go, he returns to his family home on Crockett Island, a tiny fishing community in the middle of nowhere. It's not exactly a triumphant homecoming though. The island's fishing industry is on the ropes after a recent oil spill, the town's kind of dilapidated and run down, people are wary of him after his time in prison, and his loss of Catholic faith doesn't sit well with the deeply religious community. Shit man, even his parents are kinda stiff and awkward around him, and his dad makes it pretty clear he doesn't want him around anymore. And if Elliot from E.T. reckons you're an asshole, then you're a fucking asshole. Crockett Island is very much a community in decline, but that all begins to change when a new preacher arrives at the local church, replacing his aging predecessor who got taken ill during a trip to Jerusalem. Father Paul, as he's known, proves to be a forceful, passionate and charismatic preacher, and his sermons soon start to bring back the wavering congregation. Even Riley finds himself drawn to the guy, especially when he offers to be Riley's AA counsellor, allowing him to finally confront the grief and guilt that's been haunting him for the past 4 years. And Riley's not the only one feeling the effects of this new preacher. Miraculous things soon begin happening to the other people on Crockett Island. The aches and pains of the older generations start to fade away, the sick and afflicted mysteriously recover from their ailments, and a young woman paralysed in an accident even regains the use of her legs. The community seems to be going through its own personal religious revelation, but unfortunately there's a darker side to all this. It begins with little things like dead animals mysteriously washing up on the beach, followed by members of the community going missing, and a pregnant woman who doesn't just lose her baby, it's like it never even existed in the first place. Even Father Paul starts to act increasingly weird, collapsing during sermons and becoming increasingly reluctant to venture outside in the daytime. What could be happening to him? How are all these things tied together? What really happened to the previous minister? And is it connected to a strange figure that's been seen wandering the island after dark? I said before that the various entries in the Haunting series use horror as more of a backdrop to explore bigger ideas, and Midnight Mass is without a doubt the most ambitious of the bunch. As much as Hill House focused on what happens when a family gets torn apart by tragic events, and Bly Manor centred around a trio of tragic love stories, Midnight Mass covers everything from religious faith to guilt, grief, sacrifice, loyalty, atonement and redemption. Reaching for grandiose ideas like these could have gone horribly wrong in the hands of a lesser writer, but Flanagan somehow finds a way to merge all of it into one seamless narrative told from multiple perspectives. And damn does he do a good job. One scene in particular where a grief-stricken character chooses to sacrifice himself rather than give in to the evil that's slowly taking him over had me absolutely glued to the screen. The music, the dialogue, the framing and the cinematography was absolutely perfect, and it brought together everything this character had been wrestling with since his very first scene in a moment that was poignant, compelling and deeply moving. Religion is obviously a massive part of the community on Crockett Island, and by extension, the story itself, and I have to give big props to the script for tackling such a divisive subject in a pretty fair and balanced way. You never get the sense that the show has an axe to grind when it comes to Catholicism. It doesn't try to belittle or undermine it as some dark, oppressive force holding people down, and it actually takes the time to explore some of the deeper ideas at the core of the religion, suggesting that it can actually be a force for good, providing comfort, guidance, and community in the right hands, but also showing how easily it can be twisted and misused by people with their own selfish agendas. It's pretty interesting to watch the reaction of Bev, the most overzealous member of the church, who seems to value it more than the community it serves, who literally walks into the scene of a gruesome murder and is just like, nah, it'll be fine, and immediately begins to construct a religious narrative to justify what she's seen. The local sheriff, on the other hand, is a Muslim, a moderate and rational man who's tolerant of other faiths, but as his son gets seduced by the miracles taking place at the nearby church, he's at a loss to argue against it. Because really, how can faith alone hope to compete against actual miracles taking place right in front of your eyes? It's an interesting new perspective from an industry that usually portrays Muslims as fanatical, unthinking zealots, but again, the script never really tries to elevate one particular religion over another, it just offers them up as different perspectives on the same fundamental question, and even suggests that they might have a lot more in common than not. Now, I'd be lying if I said the show was perfect, of course. Out of all the haunting shows, Midnight Mass is probably the lightest on actual horror. The creature behind all the stuff going on is basically just a vehicle to drive the story forward, showing up when it's needed and conveniently disappearing when it's not. It's never particularly scary even on its best day, and seeing it walking into a fully lit room just exposes how the creature design and makeup effects aren't all that good. I mean, really, you could have constructed the most outlandish creature imaginable, but instead we basically got a goofy looking vampire. For that matter, I'll never understand the preference for putting young actors in unconvincing old people makeup rather than just hiring older actors for the roles. Nothing looks sillier than an obviously young, attractive actress buried under several layers of latex, trying to act like a senile old woman. Also, accepting the idea that nobody on the island seems to recognise a much younger version of the town's original preacher, considering he's been there for his whole life and there's literally pictures of him for all to see, requires more than a healthy dose of sodium chloride. It's the same deal with him bringing the creature all the way from Jerusalem in a fucking steamer trunk. Ignoring how he was even able to convince the creature to do something like that, a single x-ray machine or customs inspection would have fucking killed his entire plan. Also, one of the big criticisms people have of this show is the pacing, and well, they're not exactly wrong. Midnight Mass is definitely a slow burner that takes its time setting up the characters and world, and even longer exploring the ideas it wants to get across. And if you're looking for a tight, fast-paced series that hurtles towards its conclusion, then you're definitely going to be disappointed. As compelling, well written and well acted as they are, some of the character monologues teeter right on the brink of being self-indulgent, and there's definitely scenes that could have been trimmed down to deliver a faster pace. And yet, I found myself not really minding this too much. Midnight Mass is a story that unfolds very much at its own pace, slowly building up the tension and atmosphere, and trying to hurry that along would have undermined everything it was trying to be. Inevitably, Midnight Mass is going to invite comparisons to the other haunting shows, and as much as I'm happy to just judge each one on its own merits, well, it's still interesting to see how they stack up against each other. Hill House was definitely the most conventional in terms of telling a decent supernatural horror story centred around a cast of interesting characters. It delivered the best scares for sure. The idea of ghosts haunting people rather than places was pretty inventive, and I enjoyed the time jumps that showed the impact of traumatic events later in life. That being said, the ending was a bit contrived and felt like it undermined everything the show had been building up to. Bly Manor, on the other hand, concentrated more on weaving a tragic love story around a supernatural backdrop. It was the most mechanically solid of the three, even if it did rely on some pretty fucking convenient coincidences to make the plot happen, but I found the central romances to be kind of flat and unengaging, and it felt like it was trying too hard to rationalise things that would have been better left ambiguous. Midnight Mass is both stronger and weaker than the other two in a lot of ways. There's some definite plot holes that could have been easily avoided with a bit more thought and care. The troubled protagonist haunted by a past mistake feels like it was lifted directly from Bly Manor. Even the circumstances are pretty similar. The supernatural horror is neither frightening nor particularly imaginative, and like I say, the pacing won't be to everyone's tastes. But these gripes aside, I think it grapples with the biggest and most ambitious ideas of the bunch, doing it in a thoughtful and balanced way. It delivers the most poignant and emotional scenes of the three shows by far, and by the time it was over, it left me feeling like I'd just watched something pretty damn special. For all the religious overtones, I think the real message to be taken from Midnight Mass is a humanist one. Whether you're religious or not, the thing that ultimately gives us comfort and reassurance in our final moments is each other. Having someone there with you at the end to help you on your way, knowing that you're not going to face it alone, is perhaps the most human of all instincts. And whether there really is an all-powerful creator behind everything, whether there's another world waiting for us beyond this one, there's something uniquely special and magical and precious about the sheer fact of our own existence in the here and now. And considering it doesn't last all that long, maybe we should all make the most of it while it does. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.